In this section, we're going to be looking at rounding. Rounding to the nearest whole number, rounding to a certain number of decimal places, rounding to a certain number of significant figures. And how do we do that? So let's introduce the concept first of rounding. The idea here is that, let's say I have these four numbers here. I want to say which whole number are they closest to. Okay, that's all I want to do. Now here is a number line. So what I could do is I could place these numbers onto our number line. So 3.16 is going to be roughly about, let's say, here. And we can see, well, it's closest to 3, isn't it? Right, so this is approximately 3 to the nearest whole number. Okay, that seems perfectly obvious. 4.73, now where would that be? 4.73 would be somewhere around about here, wouldn't it? Okay, and you'd be going, well, that one's closer to the 5, isn't it? So, okay, that's closest to 5. And then 7.48, well, 7.48 is just shy of that halfway point there, so it must be closer to 7 than it is to 8. After all, that's 0.48, that's 0.52, so it's further away from 8 than it is from 7, so it makes sense, okay, that it is 7. Now, before we get on to the last one, let's see if we can think about, well, could we identify it without placing them on the number line? Well, the number that is the next digit along is essentially telling me how close it is. So the fact that this was a 1 meant that I was closer to the 3 than I was to the 4. The fact that it was 7 was telling me that it was closer to the 5 than it was the 4. And the fact that that was 4 was telling me it was closer to the 7 than it was the 8. Okay? So when it was 5, so let's say, for example, this was not 8.5 but 8.52, okay, then 8.52 would be around about there, and that would be closest to 9, okay? So you can see that each of the numbers has this kind of trapped window, okay, that they are collecting these numbers from. But my example wasn't 8.52 originally, it was 8.5. So what we're seeing is that numbers that are less than 5 are rounding down. And so the numbers to the right, okay, so that first decimal point, so the tenths column, if that is less than 5, we are rounding down. If it's greater than 5, we're rounding up. In fact, if it's equal to 5, then here we were rounding up because the next value was more. But if it's actually on that point, then surely that's ambiguous. Which whole number is that closest to? Is it 8 or is it 9? Well, they're both 0.5 either side, aren't they? So the point is here, it's bang in the middle. So which one should we say it is closest to? Now, you might say, well, we should say that it's not closer to either of them. We should just put, well, 8.5 to the nearest whole number is 8.5. But that isn't the way that we traditionally do it. So essentially, a decision is made and we go, well, if we are at the 8.5 figure, then we round it up. Okay, so if it's actually bang on in the middle, we round this up to 9. So if it's 8.499999, so 8.49999, for example, then it's very close to the 8.5, but because this first digit is 4, then we round this down to 8. Okay? But if it's 8.5 something, we round it up. So, let's summarise. Let's get rid of that. So, if we're rounding to the nearest whole number, let's write up some examples. If you've got, let's go with 4.0 something, so that could be 4.01, 4.02, 4.03, etc. 4.1 something, 4.2 something, 4.3, 4.4, 4.5, 4.6, 4.7, 4.8, and 4.9. Okay? If the next number, okay, so the first number to the right of the decimal point is from 0 to 4, inclusive, then we round down. So this, all of these would be 4 to the nearest whole number, okay? Whereas if the number to the right of the decimal point is 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, with anything to the right hand side, it could just be 4.5, okay? Then in this case we round up. So these would all be rounded to 5, to 1, to the nearest whole number. Okay, so that's the rule. And this rule of looking at the next point along and checking to see whether it's 0 to 4 or 5 to 9 is how we do all of these rounding problems. Okay, so I'll keep coming back to this as we go through this section.